Today we're going to install the Roush 2018 cold air intake. First we're going to remove the stock airbox, remove the sound tube that goes into the firewall, which should be a fun job. So yeah, we're going to get everything cleared out of the way and then we're going to install the Roush cold air intake. So the first step is to remove the strut brace from the top of the engine by just removing these two bolts on both sides. That should just slide out from the battery cable if you're careful. One thing you want to be careful with is working on the car when it's hot. As you be going close to the headers down the bottom, you really don't want to scald yourself. So just to be safe, you can use a cheap laser temperature reader just to ensure that it's actually cooled down enough to work on, which it is, so that's great. So the next step after you remove the strut brace is to remove the engine cover. You can just pry up on these plastic caps at the top and that should expose a 10mm nut on the inside. You don't have to actually remove the nut from inside of this hole. When you lift the engine cover off, it should just stay in there because the hole at the bottom is very small, so it's not a problem. Just before you lift the engine cover off, just make sure that you've taken this cap off, taken the rubber seal off, and that's free to lift up without pulling it off and losing it inside your engine bay. So once the oil filler is free, you should be able to lift the engine cover off without any problems. If you're really forgetful like me, or you're just lazy and you throw everything into the garage and then forget where all the little bolts are, make sure you actually just put everything in a little bag and just tape it to the engine cover so that 2 years down the line you actually know where everything is. So I don't know about you, but that actually looks nicer to me. I'm not sure what Ford were thinking with the engine cover for the 18. But I actually prefer it like this, even if there's a bit of a rat's nest of wires and tubes everywhere. One great little tip as well is that you can actually remove this oil filler neck. So when you've removed the engine cover, you've not got this weird thing sticking out. So if you just twist that loose like you do with the top oil filler cap, you should just be able to put the top oil filler cap straight on there, so it looks much neater. So as you can see, it clears up a little bit of room and it looks much nicer. So the next step is pretty easy. You just want to disconnect everything from the airbox. So you want to disconnect the sound tube, the breather hose, vacuum lines, and the MAF sensor. Just make sure when you move this out of the way that you just keep it free from any dirt or water ingress or anything like that. So pop that to one side, and then you want to remove this, I believe it's a 10mm bolt, and then you want to loosen the clamps around the throttle body and the clamp around here to make it a little bit easier as well to take it out in sections. You don't need to actually remove the top of the airbox, you can just lift it all out in one go. So first you just want to remove the sound tube. It's best if you actually get a pair of these style pliers rather than the smaller ones, because they just make life easier. There we go. So the next step is just to remove the vacuum line, which if you just press down on the black tab at the back, it should just pop right off. There we go. So the next step is to remove the PCV tube. This one's slightly different to the last in that there's a clip on the back which you can't actually see, but if you just lift it away from the tube itself, it should just allow it to slide off. There we go. And after that, just disconnect the MAF sensor harness. Just pop that out of the way. And now you just want to remove the clamp from the airbox and the clamp from the throttle body. So at this stage you can go ahead and just separate the airbox from the intake tube. And then the intake tube should just slide right off the throttle body. There we go. So once you've got the intake tube removed, you just want to go ahead and remove the 10mm bolt, and that should allow you to remove the entire airbox assembly right out. It's a little bit tricky, just wiggle it back and forth basically. It gets caught on this little edge here a little bit, but it will come out. So with that bolt out of the way, you should just be able to remove the entire thing. Let's get that pesky sound tube out of the way. that's it. So before you remove the sound tube from the firewall, you just need to remove a plastic rivet that's just connecting the sound tube to the strut arm. So the next step is to remove the sound tube, and it's not a fun job, I can tell you. Every time we've done this, I've always ended up with bruises up my arm. So what you want to do is just reach all the way to the back of the engine. You should be able to feel like a rubber grommet and a nylon lock nut. So for the next step, we're going to remove the sound tube. For that, you're going to need a 10mm ratcheting wrench. That is important. If you don't get a ratcheting wrench, it's going to be an absolute nightmare to remove. But basically reach all the way to the back. I'll essentially go through just next to the dipstick. So remove the nut all the way to the end of the stud. Once it's at the end of the stud, just turn it by hand so you can catch the nut and it doesn't drop down into the engine bay. The problem with this nut is that the stud that you're actually removing it from is really long. You just need to keep ratcheting away for a good few minutes. Once you got it to the end of the stud, you should just be able to freely turn it by hand. And that's it. And that's the nut that you're removing. I'm just going to show a picture actually of what that looks like behind the engine once you've removed that. So this picture was taken with a endoscope that I purchased from eBay for cheap. I think it was like £15. Yeah, once you've removed the nut, the sound tube should just pretty much, with a bit of prying, I might have to reach behind there actually and just manually. There we go. And that should just twist out. You kind of have to twist it around to remove it. There we go. And again, just to stay organised, just attach the bolt that we removed to the sound tube just in case we want to replace that later on or sell it. Don't know why anyone would buy this, but there we go. So the next step is to install the rubber grommet that Roush provide, and that just seals the firewall from any water getting in there from where the sound tube was. I have found as well, if you just spray a little bit of silicone grease, it does allow it to slide in there a little bit easier, because it is quite tricky back there. You've not got much room. So the next step is prepping the Roush air intake. So I'm not going to show you how to actually assemble the Roush airbox. It's very straightforward. You literally just connect everything together, tighten down the clamps, and screw these self-tapping Torx bits in. There's really no need to go into that, as the Roush instructions are pretty straightforward. So the next step is to transfer the MAP sensor to the Roush airbox, and you're going to need a T20 for this. So next you just want to remove the 3 isolators from the bottom of the stock airbox. So you've got this one big one here, you've got this one with a metal insert. Just remove the metal insert first and then the rubber should slide out. And then you've got this little one down here that just needs to go onto the Roush airbox. Some of these are a little bit tricky to remove with one hand, so I'm just gonna put the camera down for a second. Once you got those last 2 removed, you just want to put those onto the Roush airbox. So the big one just goes on here. Again, it's a little bit tricky to do with one hand. There we go. And then the one with the metal sleeve just sits in here. I'm just gonna have to put the camera down again because it's a little bit tricky, but basically just put this rubber grommet in here and then put this metal sleeve through the top, and that allows the bolt that secures it to the chassis of the car to compress down without damaging the rubber. So now you've got the rubber isolators installed and the MAP sensors installed, you just want to transfer this into the car. What you will find is, because there's no gasket that seals the air inlet tube against the front of the car, is that you'll get some radiator backwash, so essentially hot air coming from the radiator. That means that when you're idling, the temperatures do tend to climb. What you can do is you can get some 3M tape and some foam, and you can actually just attach it on the inside here. What I will say is if you do put foam in here, it does actually bring temperatures down considerably, but I would be a little bit concerned about narrowing the inlet diameter down, so it's something you can choose to do or not, but it's worth experimenting with if you're having problems with high intake temperatures. So the best way to insert the cold air intake is just to put the air inlet pipe in first. So if you just attach that to the front of the car, the rest of it should go in a little bit easier. Like so. So we're not going to bolt things down just right away because we want a little bit of movement so that we can put the air intake tube on. So we're just going to install the air inlet pipe. So if you just finesse both sides in, I'll give it a little bit of a wiggle around, the rubber should slide over both sides fairly easily. There we go. Once you've done this, you just want to reconnect the PCV line. It should click when it goes over properly. And then you just want to reconnect the vacuum hose, and you want to reconnect the MAF sensor. So one thing you might have to do is just detach the MAF sensor from the clips underneath to give you a little bit more length. So once you've got everything connected, you just want to make sure that the rubber seals going over the throttle body and the airbox are well secure and tight, and then you just want to tighten down the clamps. And then finally you just want to secure the airbox to the chassis of the car. So after the airbox is installed, you just want to put the strut brace back on. You just want to secure the strut bolts down and then torque them to 46 foot-pounds. And that concludes the installation of the Roush 2018 cold air intake on the 2018 Mustang GT. Let me know in the comment section below which you prefer, before or after. So stay tuned for the Roush 2018 cold air intake review video, where I'll be going over the performance, pros and cons, any quirks that I've found with the system. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you like the content I've been producing so far, please subscribe, and I'll see you next time.